idea of this collection is that, of course, it has to do with numismatics, but since numismatic history started in the 7th century BC, the first thing a tyrant does, he usually strikes a coin or money of some form with his name, his badge, something relating to him. And this is true all throughout written history. And the collection starts off with the earliest coins of the Greeks and goes through many different phases. There's tyrants of every type and manner, be a king, it can be a queen, it can be a president, he can be a dictator, many different names. But in effect, they're tyrants. And that's why we call this the Tyrant Collection. It's number 5 in a series of exhibitions that we're putting forth. Each one focuses on a different river or waterway, because basically that's where civilizations grow. Since the collection starts with the earliest of the French coins, none better than the first coin. There was a tribe in Gaul, in Celtic Gaul, called the Parisi tribe. And of course, the name Paris is a derivative of the Parisi coinage. We have here a gold stater struck in the 1st century BC, which we consider to be the first true French coin. After the Parisi coinage, the next group of people that occupied the area are the Visigoths. Rome has fallen in the 5th century AD, and the Visigothic kingdom in Gaul took over. These are all Visigothic coins. Look how similar they are to the Byzantine coins. They took the ongoing coin of the realm, which was the Byzantine solidus, copied the design, but will have the name and portrait of the Visigoth. So we continue here, and these are more kings that most people haven't heard of, but exist only because of coinage. King Clovis, he ruled, look how it looks like a Byzantine coin, but it's struck by the King Clovis. Chilibert I, King of Orleans. Then we get into the 6th and 7th century, the Merovingians. These struck gold, some silver, and mostly coppers. These gold coins were a lot of money at the time, and these are really the Dark Ages. And then you have Chilibert II, King of the Merovingians. You have Clovis II, who became King of Nuestra and of Burgundy. So the Merovingian Empire was growing. And these are all Merovingian coins. As we go through the 8th century, for example, look at this. This is a portrait, but these are the Dark Ages. This Nymphidius, who was a patrician, was only known from this one small coin. He made a donation of his property to the Abbey of St. Victor in Marseille, and he's known for that. But nobody knew what he looked like or what he did if it weren't for this minor little coin. Charles Martel, one of the last of the Merovingians. And then we'll go into the Carolingians. Carolingians come about in the early 8th century, mid-8th century. You have Pepin the Short. He must have been short, but this was the father of Charlemagne. There's Carloman, who was the next king, and then his son, Charlemagne, king of all the Franks. He boldly put his name on the coin, Charlemagne and king of the Franks. And then you have the Carolingian Empire here. Gold is almost unheard of under these kings. Virtually doesn't exist, but nice silver dinars are collectible, and this collection contains one of every one. After the Carolingians, we have a king by the name of Hughes Capet, and he started the Capetian dynasty. All Dark Ages, all through the 9th and 10th century. You have the first of the Louis to become king under the Capetian dynasty, and that is Louis VI. As we get into the Capetians, into the 11th and early 12th century, again, gold is unheard of, but you do have the silver coin called the silver tornos. The first of the gold coins is called a chase d'or. Philip IV, king in the 12th century, he was considered a very handsome man at his time. His nickname Le Bel, and he was called Philip Le Bel. They kind of look like British coins at the time because that was the coin of the realm. So it has that Gothic architecture. But as we get into the Petit Royals, the Royal, the Florin de Royals, we come upon the Angel d'Or in 1311. And on these coins, you have a lamb. And why is a lamb depicted? Because of the mutton trade. France, the most important thing to France was mutton, was lamb's wool, and that was her forte. So each of the various kings, Philip IV, Louis X, they showed these coins on his coins. Louis X is well known as being the king who brought back the thorn of crowns that was captured during one of the Crusades. Then we have Philippe V, again a Capetian. But look how beautiful the designs are. Now we're getting to the end of the Middle Ages and a Renaissance period where art is taking form. I have a coin with beautiful full edges. Every piece of wool on the sheep can be seen. So it's much different 100 years later. You can see the artwork. After the Capetian, Philip VI in 1329 issued what's called the Parsis d'Or, a Parsis of gold. Looks very similar to the English coins where the king is seated on a throne and his name around. But he left the empire as king without a suitor. After Philip VI, there's a famous coin called the Florin of George. And the reason it's called the Florin of George is because this king introduced a new subject, a St. George killing the dragon. Well, that's an English theme. So the French were not particularly proud of using an English theme on their coinage, and it only was struck in 1 year, in 1341. And this is one of the finest, if not the finest, to exist in private hands. As we go through the Valois dynasty, with Philip VI still as king, it's changed back to the archetype angel and the Christian symbols, of course, and all the Gothic design that was more acceptable to the people. Then you have the Couronne d'Or that he struck in 1340, another new denomination. It departs from the king's earlier types, but it looks very similar to the coin struck by Edward III, who was also King of England. Again, not very popular in England. And so very few of these coins exist. And a new coin comes in. It looks like a ducat, almost like a trade ducat of Italy. This type design was made 4 or 5 different nations, and it was originally to be a trade coin because trade was opening up in the world, particularly the competition between Portugal, France, and England, and Spain. So this was made as a trade coin, weight of a 1 ducat. As I mentioned earlier, Edward III was King of England. You have a period in French history where the English kings came to dominate the French throne. You have King of England here, Henry VI, Salute d'Or, an Angel d'Or, Charles VII. These coins have a distinct look to them, but have that similar English feeling. He went back to using the Angel d'Or with the mutton on the obverse. And then there was a whole series of Charles VII as King of England that were struck in the various mints. This collection contains virtually every known example from the various mints. Again, Charles The seventh, beautiful design coin showing the royal cross with angels flying in between the crosses. Very beautiful design, unique to this coin. And then you have Louis the 11th, who struck a number of the coins very similar. His coat of arms, the symbol of France. Not very many portrait coins were struck during his lifetime. And then you come upon Charles VIII as king. Here's a gold coup d'or struck as a dolphin, first type. It's an interesting design. And then also during the Valois dynasty, you have Louis the 12th, who is also the Duke and King of Milan. Notice how this coin looks like a Renaissance piece from Italy. And this is him as the Duke of Milan, but King of France, and a double ducat. It's one of the great rarities in the collection. 143 is a coin, a portrait gold coin of Henry. So it's called a Henry d'Or. And this coin is extremely rare as it shows his alliances as not only King of France, but he now made an alliance with Germany and the Protestants of Elizabeth I of England, and also the Ottoman Empire. The plunder of the Spanish Netherlands was enjoyed during his time, also as a king of Italy. He abandoned the claims of the French in Italy. In the same year, he was in a jousting tournament and he lost, and his death was a result of losing that tragic tournament, and his coinage ceased. So he only was king from 1847 to 1859, but that, again, carrying over that beautiful portrait and doing away with the bland coin of the realm of the coup d'ors. As we go through the Valois dynasties, we have King Henry II, which we just talked about, and then we have Francis II, and we have Charles IX as king. Various denominations, again, mostly a coup and half a coup d'ors. Henry III, king. And then we will start with the Bourbons. The Bourbon kings, which were, of course, Habsburgs. The first of the Bourbon kings is Henry IV. And we go through Louis XIII, who ruled for 4 decades. And you have the artistry. Early in his coinage, he didn't put his portrait. But here he just shows his portrait, and wow, does he show it. This is called a 10 Louis d'Or. So it's 10 times the weight of the single d'Or, and this was given as a presentation piece. There's only 3 or 4 in existence, and this one is just a fantastic coin. And now Louis XIV, who became the longest monarch, the longest king in history. He ruled for 60 or 70 years. And his coinage shows the maturity and how it changes. The young head, as he's a teenager, you come here, look, he's maturing. Then as we get here, he's a young man. Here he is an elegant, an elegant man. Look at that mane. Again, very conceited. And as we get later into his reign, here's 1686. He still ruled for another 30 years after this coin. I should mention that Louis XIV was also known as the Sun King. Okay, if you look at this half Louis d'Or, you see that mint mark above his head, which is in effect as the sun reflects on this, shining over the king. This is one of the last coins struck by Louis d'Or. And again, he's here, he must be in the 60s or 70s, but still very much flattering his portrait. And here, he certainly didn't look like this. So now we come to the next king, which is Louis XV. And here with Louis XV, here he is as a child, here he is as a young teenager, and the coins are absolutely beautiful. You have some magnificent examples of the king from the various mints and the various styles of portrait and hairdress. He ruled for almost as long as Louis XIV. You have Louis XVI, and times are very troubled. You have all the new ideas of enlightenment during the period of Louis XVI. Many of their programs reflected this, and the kingdom started to drown in debt. Louis XVI, who ruled for better part 20 years, was in a bad way. When this coin was struck, an angry mob seized the king at Versailles and brought him to the palace in Paris and put him on trial. Louis XVI tried to flee, he was apprehended, and before the coin was struck, he tried to make a peace with the parliament. You can see the reverse of his coin shows its revolutionary design, which shows the angel writing on the Constitution. This coin was struck 5 days after the king was executed. Things were set up, was ripe for a strong individual to come to power. You have somebody by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte, a military general. And he, like all tyrants before him, put his portrait on, and all the people in his close-knit family were put on the various thrones in Europe during the Napoleonic period. On the earliest coins, Napoleon, he has his title, Bonaparte, Premier Consul. After he's Premier Consul, Napoleon becomes Emperor. So here he's Emperor. As we go through the Napoleonic period, and now he crowns himself, which he did on Christmas Day. He's called Napoleon Emperor, and he's crowned. The Pope wouldn't crown him, he crowned himself. These coins are very popular. It became the coin of the realm all through the Napoleonic period until his demise. And then in 1814, you had a period in French history where you have King of Prussia, the Tsar of England. They all had input on the French crown, and they brought back the Louis XVIII for the first restoration of the monarchy, thinking that would satisfy. And then Napoleon was imprisoned in 1815 on the Isle of Elba, and on Elba he raised an army, and he came back and to rule in France for 100 days. And that 100 days in 1815, he issued a gold coin, and this is the gold coin that he issued, and this is a proof, the finest example known of maybe 2 or 3 in existence. So it's one of the prizes in this collection. The 1815 100 days gold 20 francs. So after this, the Bourbon dynasty is restored, and Louis XVIII, who was in exile in England, came to rule. And he ruled in the first government in exile, and then as king. And he served from 1815 to 1824. So this is the coin of the 100 days of 1815. Here's the coin of the king in exile, King Louis XVIII, and then the regular coinage after that. The collection continues through King Charles X, Louis Philippe, and during this period, a lot of patterns were made. And this is in here because I think it's the most beautiful, one of the most majestic coins of all time. It's Charles Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, known as Bonaparte III, who became president. A weak guy, but boy, look at this portrait, look at this coin. It's one of the most beautiful pieces ever made. Then, during the time of Napoleon III, or Charles Louis Napoleon, who's also known as, you have the Second Republic gone back to the Republican ideals, and you have the angel signing and writing on the Constitution. And we go through the period of Napoleon III. The collection contains all the different types of Napoleon III in gold, and we end with the Third Republic of France in 1909, and these are the well-known French roosters. But this is a matte proof. Only a small handful are even known to exist. A brilliant proof example here. So it's not just a normal 20 franc rooster that is a common bullion coin even today. These are special examples. And then after the Third Republic, of course, you do have some coins that lead up to 1936 and really the demise of France because of World War II. This collection ends at really the start of World War II, because after that, tyrants sometimes are on coins, but coinage lost a lot of its importance, its financial importance, its economic importance. When a nation's wealth and history can be measured by its coins, after World War II things change. You have national banks, you have paper currency, you have other things that no longer really represent what a portrait of a tyrant meant on a coin. One of the questions I've been asked is, when are we going to sell this collection? And I really want to make this clear. We have no intent of selling this collection, and neither does the owner. He wants to share it with the public, and he wants the educational part of this numismatic collection to be viewed, and somebody will get as excited as him. And since he has a wherewithal to do it, to me it's just a pleasure. Again, these coins are not for sale, but if you have coins that you think the tyrant would be interested in, go to his website and you'll be answered.